Hello, it's Stephen Hadman, and welcome to our webcast. And I'd like to welcome Greg and Ian as well.
Yes, good morning everyone.
Morning, folks. And our topic today is Humanised Blockchain, ethical food supply chains unlocking blockchain power as a solution to Covid-19. And this is part of our virtual crowdsourced funding process and giving anybody interested insight into what we're doing at Two Hands in relation to this topic. And just to give you an idea of the aim, what we want to do is try and describe how Two Hands has developed this capability to humanise the use of blockchain in this supply chain of food to high-end restaurants, but ultimately to everybody, which will avoid the use of wet markets in China, but also deliver a direct delivery model in terms of supply chain into the future as Two Hands develops.
Yeah, and I guess, Stephen, what we truly believe we can achieve is bringing ethical food supply chains global and as a solution to mitigate the risk of future pandemics. We truly believe we can achieve that.
Yep. Good. So what we're going to do is talk about this idea of next generation, next stage organisations, and there's an opportunity post-COVID to start doing something different in organisational life, and Two Hands is an example of that difference. So that's what we'd like to impart in the next 15 to 20 minutes. What I find interesting is through COVID, organisations have been forced to trust their people because they've been forced to work from home. And in my work, a lot of people say they can't trust their people, whereas this next generation idea is the idea that we're all grown-up people and we can be trusted. And rather than managing to the bottom 10%, we actually manage the top 10% and bring everybody up. So we invite the best self of people in. So let's just keep going. So that's our intention. And all I've done there is given you a summary of what I believe is the old way that organisational life has been. And then I've given a new way, and really the last two comments in each of those bullets are relevant. So in the old hierarchical top-down world, there's a lack of transparency and trust. We tend not to trust our people. So what we tend to do as a leadership style is to have power over people. And in this new way, this next generation opportunity is that we actually work with transparency and trust. We treat everyone like a grown-up adult, and they don't need to be micromanaged. We manage to the best and not the worst. And in terms of power, we have power with people. So power over is the old, and power with is the new. And Ian and Greg will talk to that as we proceed.
And I guess, Stephen, if I could just help people understand where we're going with this, is that Steve and I first met believing that the corporate model is broken. There's a better way to do this. And in doing this, we've found that we're approaching the business in a very ethical way. The supply chain has the same approach with ethics, and we'll talk about that later on. And that has led to unlocking the power of blockchain with now. We're one of the first in the world to monetize blockchain, and the growth is surprising. It's rapid, so it works. And we see from that could lead to a solution that unlocks the great power within blockchain that can provide an answer, a solution to COVID-19. So that's where we're going with it.
Wonderful, yes. So you hear blockchain being the immutable truth. Me, I'm a people-centric person. I wonder, people have to be trusted for the immutable truth to actually work through the supply chain. And what we've done is married together the human side of the organisation with the technology to do what we're talking about, which is humanising that technology to enable the solution. So let's move to our next slide. So I've just used our title So humanised blockchain, we're starting with ethical, and you can see that I've defined what we believe ethics are in that idea. And keep going, Greg. So supply chains, we're talking about direct, we're talking about connecting fishers and restaurants and farmers, and we're transparent and we're collaborative. Now they're large, four big words in organisational life and international supply chains that tend not to exist. So that's what makes the two hands option so significantly different, and it enables the unlocking of the blockchain. And with that, next one down. Next one down is this idea of, is this power idea. So you can see on the right hand side the picture of the human being coming out of the ground. The idea is that that's humanising and people are becoming more human. What we're doing in this next generation organisation is to create places that are good for human beings to spend a large part of their life in. And we'll talk about that a little bit more now. So what I'll do is I'll hand over to Ian, but what we actually did obviously is Ian and I wrote a book, and Ian's going to talk about this very bizarre picture you may see here of the fruit. So Ian, over to you to explain.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Wonderful to be here, folks. I hope you enjoy this presentation. And what you have in front of you here, on my right and your left, it will be, is a pile of red apples, and this represents business as usual. This is the hierarchical system, organisational system that is common in the world today. And this system basically assumes that everyone's a red apple. We all have numbers. And it also assumes that the higher up you go, the smarter you are, and the lower down, well, the ones who are at the lowest level really can be dispensable. And we wanted to change that in the business that I had, and we wanted to move from this power over system to a power with system. And what we did was that we changed, and over on my left here you'll see a circle of fruit, and all this entire group of fruit is on the same level. And you see oranges and apples and pears and kiwi fruit. And in this situation, every piece of fruit is different. And what's important to recognise is because we're human beings, we are all different. And our new system recognises that difference. And so we had to go, and the other thing is that I would like to point out that we do have a tomato in here. And the tomato, a lot of people don't think a tomato is a fruit, and it is. And that's our diversity just there. And so what we did in our organisation, I was running a construction business, and we implemented this new system.
And I'll see your advertisement on your top.
And initially, I had to perhaps be in the centre of the fruit, and we invited all our contractors into that circle. And I had to be there whilst we did some training, but eventually the idea was to move out and to be on the periphery. And the idea is that you're part of the team, not controlling it. And people, this is a system where expertise outranks rank, so that if you've got something to say, you stand in the middle and you say it, and then you move to the outside, and that's how it works. It's not control over people any longer. People are adults, as Stephen said. Self-responsibility is the future in business, and we're seeing it all around the world. So that's how we changed, and this is what our teams did. And it worked really well. It was remarkable. The results were amazing. Financially, it produced more profit, and people were happier, and they took this home with them. And actually, some of them took it into their family relationships. It was great to see. Stephen.
And what we did, so within two hands, is Ian presented this red apple hierarchy and the diverse circle of fruit. It's now 11 months ago in Apollo Bay, which is a lobster processing location, and we had our Chinese team and the Australian team together, and we made a very conscious decision to move from this red apple hierarchy, because Greg, even though he probably liked the view from the top, he actually thought that the business could run differently and wanted to create this circle of fruit. And I don't think he wanted to actually be in the middle. So from the beginning, Greg stood and sat in the circle of fruit. And we introduced this concept of self-management, where people put their hand up for things they wanted to do. We made sure that they were competent and capable to do that work, and they stepped in and ran projects, sub-projects, activities, and then stepped out of the circle. This is part of the mirror organisational development framework, where we have the pioneer as the first phase, differentiation as the second phase, and federation, which is this phase we're talking about. And so Greg was very fascinated. Perhaps, Greg, you'd like to say something about the two hands model in terms of this context and what went on within the business after we did this workshop 12 months ago.
Yeah, it was extraordinary, Stephen. We discussed at length the mission and the values. We all agreed on what values we would pursue. And I recall too, just jumping ahead a little, Stephen, that we went up to Shanghai. We held another workshop in Shanghai with our logistic partner up there and our entire team. And before going up there, we were wondering, wow, no, China is such a different culture, different language, different political system. Is it going to resonate? And to our great surprise, I dare say that in the China team, the Shanghai team, it resonated much more strongly with them than it did with our China team. With the Australian team. So it was just extraordinary. And so it's shown it's going across cultures and political thinking. And we have our last mile distributor who's a dear partner of ours who believes in our mission and is aligned with our mission and values, who says he wants to see Two Hands succeed as a gift to his 4-year-old daughter for her future. How good is that? We have one of our team members, Alex Xu in Shanghai, who, when we're discussing the mission and values, she stopped everyone and she said, China has become a world power. And I was wondering where she's going to go with this statement. And she said, my parents and their generation sacrificed greatly. She's in her early 30s. My parents and their generation sacrificed greatly for China to get to this position, for me to enjoy the position I'm in right now. I want to see Two Hands succeed as a gift to my parents and their generation for the sacrifices they gave. And again, so we've been quite humbled at the reaction that people have had to this. And I guess as just the last example, Stephen, before passing back to you, and almost straight after the workshop, what we did, we sat together as a team on Zoom. There was 12 of us at the time, and we openly discussed what salaries everyone was going to have. So how often is that done in the corporate world, where everyone nominated what salary they wanted, and then the team either agreed or disagreed. And there was one instance where the team didn't agree, and we went through a process then to get that person, give a person coaching, advising, and that was up to that person to come to the right amount, and that ended up happening. But everyone had tremendous trepidations about discussing their personal salary in an open format for everyone to know and understand. But it was an extraordinary experience where it was humbling. The respect shown to each other during that process was how would you describe it, Stephen? It was just humbling. It was just an extraordinary process.
It was a surprise.
Yeah.
So let's move on. So from what you're hearing, the phrase that comes to mind is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Okay? So what we're wanting to do was create this culture that enabled the organisation to be incredibly agile and capable. And what that does is it raises a global phenomena that's been going on for the last 4 or 5 years, which is this book called Reinventing Organisations by Frederick Laloux. And if we can go that slide, Stu. And Frederick Ian and I met Frederick a few years ago, and this teal movement in the world is creating these next stage organisations, and part of that is initially making sure that we create an environment where we are our best selves. So you can see there, they're the 4 values that the organisation Two Hands has, and they lead into, if we go to that next slide, this idea of living above the line and below the line. So as Greg described, this was a very new way of working, and we weren't saying we were perfect, but what we were saying was we're going to listen to each other, we're going to respect each other, we're going to see the other person, and we're going to relate in an interdependent way, which we can obviously see in the COVID world. We can see the independence of our fellow citizen doing exactly what they're asked, which allows us to flatten the curve. And we can see that in China they've flattened the curve, and thankfully in Australia we've flattened the curve by actually working together. Now the thing about above the line and a next generation culture is that it creates what is now deemed in the mainstream as a psychological safety. That is, people are safe to be themselves. They can take off their professional mask and be real human beings, which is exactly what we did in our collaborative construction project. That people changed dramatically when they were invited to be whole. And so that's what we're creating as an ability to then use this technology, the blockchain technology, in a very human way to create a better supply chain which can lead to removing food fraud, which is a huge issue. I think we're quoting something like $50 billion globally, and it's certainly a significant issue in China. And the Two Hands solution links culture with technology to deliver that solution. So let's keep moving. Let me just give, this is an example Greg described this, so just skip through, Greg, 2 more. So these are the 3 styles. That first style is how mainstream organisations operate where leadership's not shared. Okay, and step 2 was creating the circle, but Ian staying in the centre. Okay, so much better than the first step, but not as quick as the 3rd step when the centre is open. So that last step 3 is an open centre, expertise outranks rank. Okay, we're all treated as equal human beings, and we're all different. So we get to know the real person, and in that environment, it creates an energy. Ian's project manager called it the vibe. I've always seen it as the force, because it creates an energy in organisational life that I've never seen anywhere else. So high performance, you can feel the difference. It's most productive.
Stephen, it's important to point out that in this old system, it's based around fear, doubt, and hate.
Yep.
And particularly in the larger the organisation, the worse it gets. This new system, this flat system, works with trust, care, and courage. We trust each other because we do what we say. We're actually adults. We care about each other because we're human beings. We create the psychological safety net that Stephen talks about because we know and we respect each other as human beings. And courage, we have the courage to actually name the issue, deal with the issue, not the person. And so it's a complete rethink of how business should be done.
Wonderful. So let's go on to our next. So just to give you a little bit more about Frederick Laloux and teal, because as you may have seen on the Two Hands website, it talks about the pursuit of teal, and we're defining teal in this me to we philosophy, but also within the reinventing organisations. And that next slide, Stu, if we can. It creates these 3 elements. So wholeness of the human being. So we spoke about that. This is what we did in the me we philosophy. Self-management was treating people like grown-ups, okay, and not micromanaging. And then evolutionary purpose is, why do you exist? Is it money? So Ian wanted to change the culture of the construction industry. For Two Hands, we want to change how food is distributed and build connection between farmer and fisher and the restaurant and the consumer of those products globally. And what we're doing is starting in Shanghai, because that's one of the toughest markets in the restaurant chain. So where what we found is that the MeWe story is very much linked into this teal environment, which is why you'll see that reference. There's a little bit of work going on in Australia in relation to that teal approach. So let us turn our minds to then.
Hey, Stephen, if I could just add that, Stephen, could you take it off share screen? Stephen's talked about this. Stephen's talking about this book, Frederick Malou, Reinventing Organizations. What he's done is that he's done an investigative study into companies that have undertaken this approach that we're talking about now. And what is really interesting, there's some companies that have been doing this for decades. There's some companies that have tens of thousands of employees that are based in Europe that have undertaken this approach, and they've achieved exceptional results. So don't think this is something airy-fairy that's new that isn't going to work. And the evidence shows from this forensic study that Malou has undertaken, and that it's been translated into many different languages. It hasn't been advertised, and it's become a rather worldwide phenomenon. This book. It achieves results, and we've found internally, even as a startup, we're one of the first. Our team members are based in. We're headquartered in Melbourne. We're also based in Adelaide, Shanghai, and Silicon Valley. Our little team is one of the first in the world to monetize blockchain. And once we achieved that, we thought, why are we one of the first in the world to do this? Our little team. And as we thought about it, we said, well, this new next generation organization approach we're undertaking produces an ethical environment across a whole supply chain. So not just with one company, with all our supply chain partners, and even to the hotels we're working with. It's such that, if I can describe it, I think you wanted to segue anyway, Stephen, the blockchain, right? This is the segue. And so, in the early days of us trying, because we started off by wanting to be, we were first approached by leaders in the Australian Southern Rock lobster industry, some fisher leaders, who were desperately concerned about the future of their industry. And so, Stu, could we go and read that, please? So, and they were desperate call for help. And so what we found in talking with them is that no one seemed to be fighting in their corner. So we found that to chefs and to consumers, the producers, farmers and fishers are faceless, their regions are invisible, the supply chains are black box. So it's little wonder in that environment that food fraud is a shocking world issue, and little wonder it leads to terrible situations. Like I've been to a number of the wet markets and fish markets in China countless times, and honestly, they're dreadful. It does need to change. But we need to be providing solutions, not recriminations and finger pointing and blaming. That will head down a bad path. And so this is the solution. So in the early days, what we were told by our head of technology, Derek Mooney, Derek said that, hey, blockchain is a recorder of information. It's a ledger. And so what you need to do, you need to first start with all the information through the supply chain that can be recorded up to a blockchain. And so we thought, okay, that's not going to be too hard. Man, that was so hard. Wow. So we had to jump over the Great Firewall of China, but also, and this is where, because we know that Walmart has had a lot of press internationally about implementing blockchain, and they're doing it with PwC. So the world's biggest retailer dealing with one of the world's biggest accounts, probably the world's biggest account, two heavyweights in the commercial world. They're not having success implementing blockchain. And here's a little two hands we are. And the key, as we've looked into it, is that this ethos that we're working with, that we're wanting something bigger than ourselves. We want to fight for fishers and farmers because no one appears to be in the corner right now. And that led us to, and 95% of Australian rock lobster goes to Shanghai. That's why we started in Shanghai. And it's the toughest place in China and Asia to work in terms of restaurant because they're just so adamant about innovation and food. So they set a very high bar for us. But what we found with the executive chefs in Shanghai is they said, listen, food fraud is so rampant here. A number of them said, we don't trust anything that comes to our kitchen. They said, two hands, if you're going to do this, you have to guarantee the authenticity of the food coming into our kitchen. So then we thought, well, the only way to do this was with blockchain technology. And that's where we realized that we need to record all of the information through the supply chain. And where Walmart and PwC are having issues is that the people in the middle like the black box. They don't want all the information recorded because they get power out of that black box about the lack of transparency. And so we had to have full transparency with every transaction, every action recorded up to the blockchain. So the only way for that to happen was for everyone that helps us go from the fisher farmer to the restaurant, every single party with every action and transaction to get that every single piece of food from the farm and then brought to the restaurant. All that information has to be recorded, every single piece of information. If there's any gaps in the information, fraud can happen. So there can be no gaps. So with the way that we're working in a very highly transparent and collaborative way, we're working in a way that is often quite humbling, to be quite frank. And we've found that has been essential to unlock this next generation, as Stephen and Ian described, has been key to working with our Australian partners and China partners to get every piece of action and transaction recorded up to the blockchain.
And what we see, we've done our product and market fit late last year with the Waldorf Astoria, and what we had was consumers of lobster in that moment, but we're now much broader than lobster. But in that experience, we had consumers consuming the lobster that had been prepared by the executive chef. They were able to swipe with their QR code on the two hands smart tag, and that led them to a video of the lobster fisher who caught that lobster, and then they could also find blockchain information about where that lobster had travelled from the time it was taken out of the sea to the time it landed in that restaurant on their plate. So that was the power of technology and blockchain, and with the power of the culture of the Next Stage organisation, what we're finding is those two things are coming together to provide a solution that then provides an opportunity to resolve and remove the food fraud that exists, and that's the development path that Two Hands is taking. So blockchain is actually very simple, but it's not very simple when it's end to end and disrupts everything. So that's what we're endeavouring to do.
The implementation is incredibly different.
Yeah,
incredibly different.
So if we take then another picture and we expand out the Two Hands, we've got this idea of a publicly created register, which is fair to say it's in its infancy in the world, but the idea is to build an ecosystem that's this end-to-end transparent supply chain using blockchain technology, and those supply chain partners who are part of the Two Hands team will start to work together, and we will ensure that good actors are in our supply chain. And as we expand into other geographies and we source product from other parts of the world, we'll have a process which ensures that we have good, ethical, transparent actors across our supply chains globally, and we'll be able to provide a perspective that will allow a public register of all those players, and we'll have what Greg calls a Jedi Council, who will look at ensuring that the good actors are rewarded and the bad actors are brought to account. And, in this example that Ian gave, Ian removed two of the contractors who weren't willing to work collaboratively. They had self-interest and it was all about me. Whereas the rest of these people, they celebrated Ian's decision to remove these two because these two were destroying the fabric of the collaboration. Similarly, bad actors will be removed from our international supply chains to ensure that we remove food fraud from that process. So that's a development step that we're going to include in our offer documents. Okay, we're unsure exactly what's going to happen in the future, but what we have a sense of is how that ecosystem can work together and offer value to the players in that system.
And part of where we're coming from here is that humans just do not handle power well. It's just the way we're built. And so no, we out of the digital age, we've got these humongous companies. Jeff Bezos will be the world's first trillionaire. How crazy is that to sell into trillionaire when we've got poor people all over the planet? It's just nuts. And you've got Amazon and Google and these other large organizations, and when they develop power, they start abusing that power, really. And so, with what Steve was talking about, now where this public register is going, I think it will be a very exciting development in the human structure, where now we've got the great isms right now: capitalism, socialism, communism. But the greatest ism, I think, is entrepreneurialism. It goes across all three of those: communism, capitalism, and socialism. It goes across all three of them, and it really sings to the human spirit. And with what the path the two hands is going down, with fighting for fishers and farmers, eliminating food fraud, and mitigating the risk of a future pandemic. So there's companies that I've noticed in England, France, Norway, Iceland, India, and Malaysia, and I'm sure there's others, who are pursuing a similar path to us. And so with this public curated register, where we put together the governance rules and regulations to ensure that all the actors that operate within that public register operate in an ethical way. So we have ethical supply chains operating under a common governance system and rules and regulations globally. So then we're assured of having ethical supply chains. But also it ensures that we've got these smaller companies around the world operating this. And so why does it have to be one giant company? It doesn't have to be one giant company. But at the same time, you can imagine that farmers and fishers that are part of the two hands marketplace, they've got, if we're connecting with England, France, etc., if something happens in China, like happening with the beginnings of COVID, then they can immediately look to these other countries because we're all connected. And so and here's a really interesting aside too. One of the reasons why multinationals are so successful because they've got massive economies of scale. It's hard to combat if you're a smaller company. What a public curated register can do, can you imagine us working with these companies in France and Norway, etc., and we've then got collaboration and communication at scale. And so that way we can have the same advantages as a multinational. What extraordinary technology that is.
So you can see why we're excited. So I think in terms of content, what we'd like to do now is hand over to some questions and hopefully some answers, depending on how we go. If we have time.
Yep.
If we have questions.
And Gail is going to finish. She's our head of marketing.
Well, so far there haven't been any questions, but there's been an interesting comment from Sasha, who said shared ideas with cooperative models have been common in food for years, which is the strength of this idea. It's familiar in some ways, but obviously with the positive tech backing, so that you've got that ability to have the tech to make sure, I guess, that everybody's ethical. So I guess just any comments.
Yeah, Sasha Rust is with the Australian Marine Conservation Society. Stephen, you sent me their information, I don't know, about 8 weeks ago, about they're in an ethical way, they're looking at, okay, what species should we be consuming based on the way that the commercial world is treating that species. So really, they're the sorts of people that we love to work with. And we see an ecosphere around what we do. We want to put an ecosphere around fishers and farmers. We want to put an ecosphere around chefs and consumers. And we see people like Sasha's group at the Australian Marine Conservation as being part of, we would love to come together with them to help us build this ecosystem. And so, and Sasha's talking there, Gail, about that these cooperatives are already at work. And so, yeah, there are, and we see ourselves working with cooperatives. Cooperatives are there for and behalf of fishers and farmers. They're made up of farmer and fisher communities. So we can then connect them directly with end consumers and restaurants from around the world. So I think it's a great answer for cooperatives.
Yep. All right. So perhaps a sign off. Thank you very much for listening and being part, and excited that you could be part of our journey. So farewell from me and Greg.
Yep. Thank you.